I remember going into watching the first Knives Out and being extremely excited. I mean, murder mystery movies are genuinely some of Lexi and I's favorite movies to watch together. Now, not only did Knives Out seem to have this nail-biting suspicion as viewers try to figure out the whodunit, the true mystery of this film, but it was also filled with this star-studded cast from Chris Evans and Daniel Craig to even Jamie Lee Curtis. It also just had this style to it that brought me back to the movie Clue, and Lexi and I could not have been more excited from this mystery movie coming from the director that some say killed the Star Wars franchise. So after watching the original Knives Out all the way back in 2019, being super excited for it, genuinely Lexi and I thought that this might be one of our favorite movies of 2019, but when watching it, you guessed it, Lexi and I were both slightly disappointed. Now, let me make this personally clear. Lex and I were not disappointed at this movie because we thought the film was bad or did not meet expectations. It just kind of left this weird taste in our mouth, and there was something that we didn't love about it. We just didn't know what it was yet. Now, once again, from the get-go, we both love the style and direction of this film. We both acknowledge that every single cast member killed it while they were on screen. However, we quickly realized that there one part that we didn't enjoy about this film is that it reveals about 90% of the mystery right in the middle of the film. For both of us, this took away from that Clue type movie that we were both looking for. And as initially viewing that movie, we felt like we had lost all of the whodunit suspense that we were looking for in a murder mystery. Now, of course, the movie does know what it's doing, and while it reveals technically who does kill Thrombey pretty early on in the movie, that was never the movie's intention. It was never the movie's intention to have the audience try and figure out who killed Thrombey and who killed the victim, but rather what we realize is that the misdirection of the first Knives Out film is that the audience is actually trying to figure out who is the mastermind behind the scene pulling all the strings. Now, if you haven't seen the original Knives Out film yet, I mean, I don't know what you're doing. It's about 3 years old, but major spoiler alerts for that movie, as well as Glass Onion from this point on. But in the original Knives Out, we learn by the end of the movie that the true culprit of these crimes is, of course, Captain America. We knew it was him. There's no way that this person could be just so gosh dang perfect. Now, it is this subversion of expectations that makes Knives Out the movie that it truly is. And while neither Lex nor I truly enjoyed this style of murder mystery or this style of filmmaking at first, upon rewatching Knives Out a few more times over the last few years, both of us have greatly grown in appreciation of the first Knives Out film as a truly great movie. So when we heard that we were getting a sequel in Glass Onion, once again, we were both very excited. Now, when we heard that it was also going to be able to stream on Netflix for absolutely free, we were even more excited. So now that we have watched Glass Onion, did it meet our expectations or did it fall to its predecessor? I think that it's impossible to watch either of these movies without first noticing how star-studded the cast for both of these films truly are. I mean, for some of us, this may have been the reason we wanted to originally go watch these movies, is because we see our favorite movie star now in a mystery film. I mean, Knives Out comes out strong with its cast from Ana de Armas, Daniel Craig, Chris Evans, and even the Queen of Horror herself, Jamie Lee Curtis. This cast is so good, in fact, that some other great actors don't necessarily have the biggest role to play. These are cast members such as Lakeith Stanfield, Catherine Langford, and Jada Martell, possibly better known as Get Out Man, 13 Reasons Why Girl, and The It Boy, and as well as several others. Now, while these members of the cast are on screen, they do a very good job at the role that they are meant to play. Once again, every single cast member kills what they are supposed to be doing. It's just that this cast is so large with so many big names that it's almost guaranteed that some get lost in the shuffle. And this is one area that I think that Glass Onion actually has a leg up on its predecessor, is simply just the cast size. The only returning character from the first film, Knives Out, is Daniel Craig as Detective Blanc, and with him being the only returning character, this allows the sequel in Glass Onion to significantly reduce its cast size. Comparatively, in Knives Out, you have 11 or 12 significant characters. Now Glass Onion reduces this to around 7, and in this main group, each character now has a role to play. And with this smaller scale, each cast member gets their moments to shine, and it makes their role more memorable. And we see, once again, this star-studded cast with names such as Edward Norton, Dave Bautista, Katherine Hudson, and the affably aforementioned Daniel Craig, and they all do an amazing job. However, unlike its predecessor, Knives Out, I do think that some characters in Glass Onion could have been written a little bit differently / cast a little bit differently. My first main gripe when it comes to character writing comes in the character of Whiskey. First, I just kind of find it odd that they decided to cast Madeline Klein in this role, primarily because she really doesn't have that much to do. Now, I understand that is kind of what the point of her character is. The movie refers to her at one point as eye candy or just a piece for Duke. However, can we just acknowledge the age difference between these two actors? If the ages of the characters are even close to their actors' actual ages, Duke could be Whiskey's father. Not to mention that the show that Klein is most known for is Outer Banks, which she plays a 16 or 17-year-old. To put this a little bit more into perspective, Lex and I are both in our 20s, and this is around the same age that Madeline Klein is, and I remember watching Batista powerbomb people for money on the WWE when I was like 5. I feel like it would just make more sense to have Duke and Birdie be this love interest and have them be together. It would make the cast even smaller, allowing us to focus even more on these great characters that we have. And if you write Whiskey out of this story, it doesn't really change all that much. The storyline where we see Whiskey showing romantic interest in Miles Braun just to get Duke a spot on Alpha News would work just as well, if not better, with Birdie in her place. I mean, the movie relies on the audience thinking that Duke is angry about this relationship with Whiskey and Miles, rather than not getting the spot for Alpha News. Now imagine how much easier it would be for the audience to believe this if we have this set group of friends and Birdie has to deal with this possibility of cheating on Duke. This sense of betrayal between this friend group just seems much more convincing. Please do not think, though, that me suggesting to write the character of Whiskey out of this story means that I think the actress did a bad job. I feel like the majority of the reason why she is in here is to appeal to a younger audience of teens, where they say, hey, she's that girl from Outer Banks, we should go watch this movie, which is just a brilliant idea. But as a viewer and an audience member watching this movie, I thought that her character was always going to have something more to do. It almost just seemed like she was on the outskirts of this story for about 95% of it. For a large portion of this movie, I actually thought that she could be the main culprit of this film because she had nothing much to do, that she was going to be on the outside, but at the end have a much larger role to play. So once we got to the end of this movie, and she's just a pawn, and a very small one at that, I was very surprised. Now, my second possible change for the cast, you would have to leave Whiskey in the movie, because like many good things, you can have one, but sometimes not both. And this second change comes out of personal bias, and it might not even work. And that is this. We need to switch Birdie and Lionel's character so Lionel could be on Broadway acting and sing. I mean, the guy is in freaking Hamilton and won a Tony, for goodness sake. So if you don't know what I'm referring to the character of Lionel, who is played by Leslie Odom Jr., who plays the role of Aaron Burr in Broadway's Hamilton. I just think it would be extremely funny to have this call back to one of his past roles. And I think actually you could switch Birdie pretty easily to be this strong feminine scientist character. Now, of course, you probably would have to change her name to something else because Birdie just doesn't sound like a name that would fit with that character, but that's an easy fix. The reason why Birdie's character would have to make this change, or Kate Hudson, which is the actress that plays Birdie, is the scientist is a significant character to this story. If you take the scientist character out completely, the story is not going to work. So somebody does need to fill that role. Now, the character that Birdie plays, however, I feel like is much more expendable and easily could be played by somebody else. If you replace the hot-headed fashion star with, let's say, Lionel is a star on Broadway trying to make his way into Hollywood, and that's the leverage that Miles has on him as Lionel is trying to make this transition to the silver screen, I think that could still work and just be a powerful character arc for that role as well. I mean, I understand that it might be stupid, but personally, I could not wait for it.
Wait for it. I can know one thing in life I can control.
While this section of the video might not be as long as some of the other parts, I did find it extremely interesting how much social commentary was in this movie. And honestly, it's probably hard to talk about parts of this movie without touching on it just a little bit. I mean, I was almost amazed on how many topics were in this movie, and they were able to touch on from mask to over-masculine influence to an abundance of celebrity microaggressions. Now, I know that none of these are particularly new issues, but the way that they decided to cover some of them almost seemed like they were predicting the future. For example, when we are introduced to the character of Birdie, she is once again struggling with her cancellation due to the inappropriate comments that she makes about the Jewish people. Now, I am someone who has a bachelor's in history, so discrimination, sadly, to the Jewish people, I know is not anything new, but as I'm watching this movie, I'm like, did this movie know about Kanye?
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
Or even the entirety of Duke's character. While I definitely feel like his character was supposed to be more of a play on as someone like Alex Jones from being a podcast news host who sells hormones, you can see definitely the toxic masculinity, and it made me think of somebody as recent as Andrew Tate. And of course, the big issue that probably many people noticed was just them touching on COVID with the mask, and I don't think that was necessarily anything intentional, like they were trying to make a huge point, but rather it was genuinely just what they were going through. This movie was made in the heart of the pandemic. If you watch some of the cast interviews, they're talking about how they have to stay all in one hotel, and that really helps them gain this chemistry as they work together. So I just thought that it was interesting how much they're able to fit in what they're actually going through in this movie, because they didn't have to do that. Right? They didn't have to make this movie take place in the time of this pandemic that many of us had just recently experienced in the real world. So overall, with this fun murder mystery touching on so many social issues, at the very least, we have to say it grabs your attention. It grabs your attention because what we see is this world that this movie takes place in. Many of the characters are facing some of the experiences that the audience has faced over the last few years, and this is both good and bad. It's good because I think it makes its characters more relatable as we just talked through the cast and how these characters are dealing with some things. The reason why this can be a con is because at its root, film is supposed to be a source of escapism, and some audience members might not want to be thrown right back into the past few years where we're dealing with big issues such as COVID. If there had to be this singular phrase to describe Knives Out and Glass Onion, to me, I think it has to be subverting expectations. It's the way that both of these movies do it, though, in their own unique way. It's the subtlety in how they do it. It's a slow reaction until there's this catalyst, usually halfway through the film, that sparks the reaction. Now, I've already previously said in the first movie, it seems like almost the mystery reveals itself pretty early on. Now, I don't have the exact time step, but around the 55-minute mark, it seems that the audience kind of knows what the mystery is. We know who actually killed Mr. Thrombey, and we're just missing this last puzzle piece. And that's what the movie spends the rest of its runtime doing. It's slowly revealing what this last puzzle piece is until we finally see it in the last 15 minutes of the film. Glass Onion, of course, takes a very similar approach to its style of storytelling. The movie follows one linear story for about the first 50 minutes of the film as we are introduced to the cast and gives away all the needed details that we need. Then, much like Knives Out, its predecessor, it takes this step back, and the storytelling isn't as linear. As in Knives Out, when it takes this jump, it shows us details only Marta knows about. In Glass Onion, now the story is telling us details only Benoit Blanc knows about. It is this type of mystery, this type of storytelling that has become so synonymous with these films, and while we did not enjoy this at first, we both quickly came to realize that it's this type of storytelling that makes these films so different, and I've really come to enjoy it. I honestly even think I might prefer how Glass Onion reveals this information compared to Knives Out. Rather, it reveals that certain characters are not who we really think they are. We also find out the death that we see on screen isn't even the main murder that we should be focusing on. What Glass Onion decides to reveal as it takes this step back and starts to tell this story in an unlinear way is that Andy has not truly been Andy for the entirety of the film. Rather, it has been her twin sister, Helen, acting as Andy to get the clues on who truly murdered his sister. I think I enjoyed this type of reveal even more actually than the type of reveal that Knives Out did, because it allows the audience members to still play the role as the detective more than the first film. In Knives Out, you know Marta did not kill Thrombey on purpose, however, we do know that she technically killed him. Then all the audience is trying to figure out is who framed Marta and what is their motive. What Knives Out does is it leaves us trying to figure out one last puzzle piece. Glass Onion, on the other hand, makes us almost put all the pieces together. We have to ask the questions: who killed Andy? Did more than one person have a role in the murder? How did they do it? And of course, what is their motive? Now, that's what's amazing, though, about both of these films and what these movies do so well is because while they're doing this, they subvert our expectations. Because what both of these movies do is they truly give us all of the puzzle pieces. They put it right under their noses. Now, in Knives Out, the difference is that we have this last puzzle piece that we're struggling to place. In Glass Onion, it's different because we have all the puzzle pieces. We know the picture that it's supposed to paint, but we're guessing it. And the reason why we're guessing at it is because it's so obvious. However, due to this transparency while viewing the film for the first time, the true culprit was the one that you least expect. Now, let me explain this in a little bit different of a way. Again, if you haven't seen this movie, major spoilers, but at this point I've already spoiled about 99% of the movie. But the culprit in Glass Onion is the most obvious one, and you've guessed it at this point, is Miles Braun. Now, this is so incredibly obvious, and Blanc even points this out in his closing monologue. Now, the film, of course, knows what it's doing. Let me give you a theoretical equivalent of an example really quick, again jumping back to the original film Knives Out. In the original Knives Out, Marta mixes up Thrombey's medication, and this is ultimately what leads to his death. The audience sees this. It's obvious. We know how he dies. Now again, this is not actually what happens, but it's to an equivalent of an example. Let's say Knives Out ended with showing us that no, Marta is truly the killer. She does know what she did, and she's secretly just trying to get her part of the Thrombey estate that she somehow knows is actually left to her. Of course, this is not what happens, and there is a much deeper mystery. This movie, Glass Onion, does the exact opposite. It gives us about 75% of the puzzle right from the beginning. And then even about halfway through, it pretty much reveals all the pieces. But it's so obvious. It's too easy. And it leaves, once again, the audience member trying to figure out where to put this last piece. This is a bold movie that honestly I really respect this movie for taking this risk. Sometimes I think mystery movies can make the mystery too difficult for any audience member to know what truly happens. Most films leave you trying to put that puzzle together with several pieces initially just missing from the box. It makes it impossible. But not this movie. It gives you all of it, and everyone should be able to solve it. The only way it could have been more obvious is if at the title it says Miles Braun is the killer. However, what better way than to subvert your expectations? In a movie where the audience thinks they are going in to be tricked, to put the answer right in front of you. Benoit Blanc even explains this pretty early on in the movie as he's having this conversation with Miles Braun. He gives this metaphor of the glass onion. He says, I like the metaphor of the glass onion, an object that seems densely layered, but its center is in plain sight. Overall, I think Glass Onion is a more than solid movie, but does it really match up to Knives Out? I think it's pretty close. I would probably give Knives Out just an A-, and I'd give Glass Onion a B+. It was a really solid movie that I enjoyed, but I don't think it quite matches its predecessor. Overall, they were both really good films that I could probably sit down and watch just about any time.
So like Jared said, this is going to be a very short amateur movie reviewer take. But I did watch Knives Out and Glass Onion, and so I do have a little bit of an opinion on both. If you've watched both movies, they're both very good. I think Glass Onion overall has a fantastic cast. I loved a lot of the characters. Despite their flaws, I thought they were really entertaining to watch, and they were very funny at certain parts, and they left you in suspense in others, which I think makes a good movie. The scenery was wonderful. It took place on an island that I thought was very nice to look at. Enjoyed the color palette and just how it looked overall. The plot was great. It was a funny mystery, which is something I really enjoy. And so that was really great. The characters played well off of each other. I thought the cast chemistry was good. But if you've watched Knives Out, it does feel like a repeat of the same movie. Hits a lot of the same points, and the pattern of the plot is very similar, I feel like. Both Knives Out and Glass Onion kind of do this thing where it introduces you to what happened, it stops about halfway through the movie, tells you exactly what happened, and finishes the movie out that way, which I don't have a problem with, but it was definitely a repeat within the sequel, which I thought was kind of lazy writing in that sense. I enjoyed the message of the movie. I thought the theme of kind of rich people control things was a really cool theme, and I did enjoy kind of seeing that play out in our characters. So overall, really good movie. Should I rank it? Is that or
I did
or
a
rate
grade.
it?
I did a grade.
What'd you
So
rate it?
I graded Knives Out, which you'll see right before this, an A-,
Okay,
and I graded Glass Onion a B+. I think they're very close.
very close. See, my only thing is, I think I like Knives Out better because I watched it first.
I can agree with that.
So I can agree with the A- rating of Knives Out. And then, yeah, I have to give Glass Onion probably very similar, a B, maybe B-, B+, something in that range, just because, like I said, they're very similar in how they're played out, and so I have a hard time giving as much credit to the second one as I did the first one.
See, that's what I think a lot of what we said is actually very similar. Lex has not watched anything that I have said yet, so she has no clue what I'm going to say, but it very much is very similar. And I think what both of these movies do very well, and the way that I am going to explain it, is it's like a puzzle. And the first movie leaves you searching for one puzzle piece, and that's the culprit behind all of it, which is Captain America. We knew it the whole time. But then Glass Onion does something a little bit different, is it almost is trying to get you to put all the puzzle pieces together, but it gives you all the pieces. Unlike Knives Out does, where Knives Out is leaving you searching for that final piece and where to put it. Glass Onion gives you all the pieces. And it's almost like, here's the puzzle box. Look at the puzzle box. It's so dang obvious, but it's still hard to put together because it's so obvious. So I think both do very well. Well, that's going to be all for this one, folks. If you like this type of movie review, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.